London, October 1814. The first chill of autumn crept through the windows of Kendrick House in Mayfair, carrying with it the scent of coal smoke and dying leaves. In the Earl's study, Catherine Morrison stood with her hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. Her breath came short and quick as she watched Christopher Edward Beaumont, Earl of Kendrick, turn away from her toward the window. She had worked in this house for 6 years, moving quietly through its corridors, ensuring his linen was pressed, his meals served, his comfort maintained. She had learned the pattern of his footsteps, the sound of his voice when he was pleased or troubled. She had loved him in silence for 3 of those years, and 4 months ago, in a moment of weakness and wine and whispered promises in the conservatory during a summer storm, everything had changed. "You are quite certain?" he asked without turning, his voice flat and cold as winter steel. 3 months certain, my lord, she replied, hating the tremor in her voice. If stories of love tested by cruelty and redeemed through courage move your heart, subscribe now and join us on this journey. You will not want to miss what happens next. Christopher turned then, and Kate saw something in his face that made her breath catch. Not anger, though that might have been easier to bear. Fear. Raw, desperate fear that transformed his aristocratic features into something almost feral. "How much do you want?" he asked. The question struck her like a physical blow. "My lord, I do not understand. How much money will it take for you to leave London? There are towns in the north, or perhaps Scotland, somewhere no one knows either of us." He moved to his desk, withdrew a small leather purse, counted coins with shaking fingers. £3. That should be sufficient to establish yourself elsewhere until the child is born. Kate stared at the coins gleaming on the mahogany surface. £3. The sum of 6 years of service, of whispered words in the dark, of promises she had been foolish enough to believe. "You wish me to leave? I wish you gone before anyone discovers your condition." His silver eyes, the remarkable Beaumont eyes that had been remarked upon for 5 generations, would not meet hers. A letter arrived this morning from Lord Denison. He represents a consortium investing in the new railway ventures. They require partners of impeccable reputation and unquestionable character. Do you comprehend what that means? It means your reputation matters more than your child. It means, he said, his voice rising, that my father left debts that will destroy this estate unless I secure this investment. It means that scandal will ruin not only me, but the 100 families who depend on Kendrick lands for their livelihoods. One mistake, Kate, one moment of weakness, and everything collapses. "I am not a mistake," she whispered, "and neither is this child. Take the money." He pushed the purse across the desk. "Take your shame and leave my house. I never want to see you again." The words hung in the air between them, each syllable a small death. Kate looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw a man she no longer recognized. The warmth that had drawn her to him, the kindness she had convinced herself existed beneath his aristocratic reserve, had been illusion. This was truth. Cold calculation dressed in fine tailoring. She took the purse, not because she wanted his money, but because she had nowhere else to go and winter was coming. "Very well, my lord. I shall spare you the inconvenience of my presence." "Kate, I must explain," Christopher said, his voice ragged. "Do not say my name," she interrupted, her voice steady despite the tears burning behind her eyes. "You have made yourself abundantly clear. I am shame. I am inconvenience. I am something to be hidden away where decent people need not look upon me." She moved toward the door, then paused. "I hope your railway investment brings you great comfort, my lord. I hope it keeps you warm on cold nights and tells you that you are good and worthy, because no one else ever will." She left Kendrick House that afternoon with £3, one small trunk of belongings, and a child growing beneath her heart. The late October rain soaked through her cloak before she reached the end of Mayfair, and by the time she found lodging in the rookeries of St. Giles, her shoes were ruined and her illusions completely shattered. Mrs. Halifax ran a laundry above which she let rooms to women with nowhere else to go. The room Kate could afford was barely large enough for a narrow bed and a chair, with a single window that looked onto an alley where refuse rotted and children fought over scraps. The walls were thin enough that she could hear every conversation, every argument, every sob from the desperate souls who surrounded her. "You are fortunate I have space," Mrs. Halifax said, pocketing the first week's rent. "Though I warn you, girl, if you fall behind on payment, you will find yourself on the street regardless of your condition. I cannot afford charity." "I understand," Kate replied. "I shall work. I can sew." "Can you indeed?" Mrs. Halifax studied her with shrewd eyes. "Your hands are too soft for quality work, but I suppose you might manage simple mending. I shall put word about. Meanwhile, you work downstairs in the laundry. No special consideration for your belly. Everyone works here or everyone starves." The work was brutal. Kate had thought herself familiar with labor from her years in service, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of commercial laundry. The heat was suffocating, the lye burned her skin, and the hours stretched from before dawn until long after dark. Her back ached constantly. Her hands, once smooth and capable, became raw and cracked, bleeding into the wash water. She did not complain. Complaint was a luxury she could no longer afford. Winter came early that year, bitter and unforgiving. Kate's thin cloak provided little protection against the wind that howled through the streets of St. Giles. She learned to wrap her hands in rags before sleeping to prevent the bleeding cracks from worsening. She learned which days the mission gave out bread and which corner shopkeeper might be persuaded to sell yesterday's vegetables for a penny less than they were worth. She learned what it meant to be invisible, to move through the world unseen, unheard, unimportant. In January, when her pregnancy became impossible to hide, Mrs. Halifax reduced her wages. "You are slower now," the woman said flatly. "I pay for work completed, not for your condition." Kate accepted this without argument. She had learned that argument accomplished nothing except to draw attention, and attention was dangerous for women like her, women with no husbands, no families, no protectors. Women whose shame was visible for all the world to see. She thought of Christopher constantly during those months, not with longing, though part of her heart still ached for what she had believed they shared. No, she thought of him with a cold, clear fury that burned steady as a candle flame. He was in his comfortable townhouse in Mayfair, while she hauled steaming laundry up narrow stairs. He was attending balls and dinners while she went to bed hungry more nights than not. He was living his life as though she had never existed, as though their child did not exist, as though £3 could purchase absolution. She hoped his railway investment prospered. She hoped it brought him everything he wanted. And she hoped it felt hollow as ash in his mouth. A thin, angry wail filled the small room as the child arrived on a night in April when spring rain drummed against the roof and thunder rolled across London like artillery fire. There was no doctor, no midwife who would attend a woman who could not pay. Kate labored alone in her small room, biting down on a strip of leather to muffle her screams, terrified that making too much noise would result in eviction. The pain was beyond anything she had imagined. Wave after wave of agony that obliterated thought, that reduced her to pure animal suffering. She was certain she would die. Part of her wanted to die, wanted the pain to end by any means necessary. But when dawn light finally crept through her window and the thin, angry wail filled the room, Kate looked down at the child in her arms and knew with absolute certainty that she would survive anything, endure anything, to protect this small life. The baby was a boy. He had a shock of dark hair and lungs that suggested he intended to make his presence known to the world. And when his eyes opened for the first time, Kate's breath caught in her throat. Silver. Perfect, unmistakable silver. the rare Beaumont eyes that had marked the family for 5 generations. "Andrew," she whispered, naming him after her father. "Your name is Andrew Morrison, and you are loved. You are so very loved." She did not tell him about Christopher. What was there to say? That his father was an earl who had chosen reputation over responsibility? That he had been worth only £3 to the man who sired him? No. Better to let him believe his father dead, a good man taken too soon, a man who would have been proud of him. "Your papa died before you were born," she told Andrew when he was old enough to ask. "He had silver eyes like yours. He would have loved you very much." The lie felt like kindness. The truth would have felt like cruelty. The years that followed were an education in survival. Kate learned to stretch a penny until it screamed. She learned to sew until her fingers bled and her vision blurred. She learned to ignore hunger, cold, exhaustion. She learned to be grateful for small mercies. A day without rain, a client who paid promptly, a night when Andrew did not wake coughing from the damp. She learned to love fiercely and without reservation. Andrew was everything. His laughter was music. His questions were treasure. His small hand in hers was the only thing that made the struggle worthwhile. By the time he was 6, Andrew had become a child of the rookeries, quick and clever and unafraid. He knew which streets were safe and which belonged to the rougher gangs. He knew how to slip through crowds unnoticed, how to run fast when running was necessary, how to fight when fighting could not be avoided. He possessed a sweetness, often fiercely protected by his mother's tireless lessons in goodness, that broke her heart. He shared his food with younger children. He stood between bullies and their victims. He asked questions about everything, hungry for knowledge the way other children were hungry for bread. "Why do I have silver eyes when you have brown eyes?" he asked one evening as they sat in their small room, Kate mending a torn shirt by candlelight. "You inherited them from your papa," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "The Beaumont family has had silver eyes for many generations." "Beaumont?" Andrew's face lit with curiosity. "Is that our name? Am I Andrew Beaumont?" Kate's needle stilled. "No, darling. Your name is Morrison, like mine. Like your grandfather, the vicar. Beaumont was your father's name, but he is gone now." "Tell me about him," Andrew said, as he did sometimes. "Tell me about my papa." And Kate would tell him carefully edited stories about a man who was clever and handsome and kind, about someone who had loved them both, about a father who had died too soon, before he could hold his son or teach him to ride or tell him stories. She never told him about the £3. She never told him about the words spoken in that study in Mayfair. She never told him that his father was alive and well and living a life that had no space for them in it. Some truths were too heavy for a child to carry. Spring arrived in 1820 with unexpected warmth, London awakening from winter's grip with an almost desperate enthusiasm. Flowers appeared in window boxes, even in St. Giles. The Thames smelt slightly less offensive. People emerged from their cramped lodgings to walk streets made golden by afternoon light. Kate had secured steady work from a modiste on Drury Lane who appreciated her fine stitching. The pay was better than laundry work, enough that they could afford meat twice a week and Andrew could have a pair of shoes that actually fit. It was not prosperity, but it was better than the grinding poverty of their first years. On a Tuesday afternoon in May, Andrew was running an errand for Mrs. Halifax, carrying a basket of laundered linens to a shop on Monmouth Street. He was quick about such tasks, knowing that completing them meant a penny for his pocket and perhaps a sweet from the corner shop. He did not see the baker's boy leave the shop door open. He did not see the fresh loaf cooling on the sill. He saw only that he was hungry, that his mother had given him her portion at breakfast again, that a whole loaf would mean they could eat well for 2 days. He took the bread and ran. He did not see the elegant carriage blocking the narrow street until he collided with it at full speed, the impact knocking him backward and sending the stolen loaf tumbling into the gutter. He scrambled to his feet, ready to run again, when a hand closed on his shoulder. "Steady there, boy," a voice said. "You are not injured, I trust?" Andrew looked up into the face of a gentleman descended from the carriage. A tall man with dark hair, just beginning to silver at the temples, dressed in a coat that probably cost more than everything Andrew had ever owned combined. A man with eyes the exact shade of silver as his own. They stared at each other for a frozen moment, recognition dawning on one side, impossible hope kindling on the other. "You have silver eyes," Andrew said, unable to help himself. "Like mine. My mam says my papa had silver eyes." Christopher Edward Beaumont, Earl of Kendrick, felt the world tilt beneath his feet. 6 years of careful forgetting, 6 years of burying guilt beneath business and social obligations and determined ignorance, shattered in an instant. This child with his face, with the unmistakable Beaumont eyes, staring up at him from the filthy streets of St. Giles. "What is your name?" Christopher asked, his voice rough. "Andrew Morrison, sir. I am 6 years old. Do you know my papa? Did you know him before he died?" Died. The word was a knife between his ribs. She had told the boy he was dead. Of course she had. What else could she say? "Your father gave me £3 and told me to disappear?" "Where is your mother?" Christopher managed. "Working, sir. She sews for a modiste on Drury Lane. She is very skilled." Andrew's chin lifted with pride. "She works very hard to care for me." "I am certain she does." Christopher released the boy's shoulder, his mind racing. "You should return that bread, Andrew Morrison. Theft is outside my sphere of concern for an honorable man." Andrew's face flushed. "I was hungry, sir. I did not mean—" "I know." Christopher withdrew a coin from his pocket. "Take this to the baker, pay for the bread and purchase another loaf. Keep the change." Andrew stared at the crown in his palm as though it were a magical object. "This is too much, sir. Consider it payment for the pleasure of our conversation," Christopher said. "Now go. And Andrew, your papa, if he were here, would be very proud of the man you are becoming." The boy smiled then, bright and uncomplicated, and ran back toward the baker's shop. Christopher watched him go, then climbed back into his carriage and gave his driver an address he had not spoken in 6 years. Copper Lane, St. Giles, above the Halifax Laundry. The driver's eyebrows rose. "My lord, that is not a safe area for a gentleman." "Then I suggest you keep the horses ready for a swift departure," Christopher replied. "Now drive." He did not go immediately to find Kate. Instead, over the following days, he watched. He hired men to observe discreetly, to report on the daily routines of one Catherine Morrison and her son. He needed to know, needed to understand what his cowardice had wrought. The reports were devastating in their mundane detail. Kate worked 14 hours daily at the modiste, her fingers moving with the precision of someone who had transformed necessity into art. She walked home through dangerous streets with her head high, arriving at lodgings barely fit for human habitation. She purchased food carefully, counting every penny, and always gave Andrew the larger portion. Andrew attended a charity school 3 mornings weekly, reading and writing with fierce concentration. The afternoons he spent running errands, earning pennies wherever he could. On Thursday, Christopher's man reported, the boy had defended a smaller child from 3 older bullies, taking a beating himself, but ensuring the younger boy escaped safely. They survived with dignity in circumstances that would have broken lesser souls. They had built a life, small and fragile but real, from the ashes of what Christopher had destroyed. On the 8th day, Christopher could bear it no longer. He went to the Thames embankment at sunset, where his men had reported Kate sometimes walked with Andrew before returning to their lodgings. He waited, pacing the ancient stones, rehearsing words that felt inadequate no matter how he arranged them. She appeared as the sun touched the horizon, turning the river to molten gold. Andrew ran ahead, pointing at boats, asking questions in the endless stream that apparently characterized his personality. Kate followed more slowly, her face showing the exhaustion of someone who had worked since dawn. She was thinner than Christopher remembered. Her dress, though clean and carefully mended, had seen better years. Her hands, visible as she brushed hair from her face, bore the marks of hard labor. But her spine was straight, her head high, and when she smiled at something Andrew said, the expression transformed her face with such genuine joy that Christopher felt something crack open inside his chest. She saw him before Andrew did, her step faltering, color draining from her face. For a moment, Christopher thought she might simply turn and walk away. Instead, she touched Andrew's shoulder. "Go feed the ducks, darling. I shall join you presently." "Yes, ma'am." Andrew scampered off, delighted by this unexpected extension of their evening walk. Kate walked toward Christopher slowly, as one might approach a dangerous animal. When she stopped, maintaining careful distance between them, her eyes were cold as winter ice. "You have no right to be here," she said. "I know." Christopher's carefully rehearsed words deserted him entirely. "Kate, I saw him. I spoke with him. He has my eyes." "He has the Beaumont eyes," she corrected, "but he is not yours. You relinquished any claim 6 years ago for the sum of £3. The words struck with surgical precision. "I was afraid." "You were cruel." "Yes." He would not argue with truth. "I was cruel and cowardly, and I have regretted it every day since." "Have you?" Kate's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Have you truly? Did you think of us while attending your balls and dinners? Did you wonder whether we had food or shelter while you slept in your comfortable townhouse? Did you imagine your son being born in a room barely larger than a closet while his mother bit leather to keep from screaming?" Christopher felt each question like a physical blow. "I did not know." "You did not want to know," Kate interrupted. "That was the entire point. I was inconvenient. We were inconvenient. So you paid your £3 and absolved yourself of any further responsibility." She turned away, watching Andrew throw bread to the ducks. "What do you want, Christopher? Why are you here?" "I want to know him," Christopher said simply. "I want to provide for you both. I want—" "What you want ceased to matter 6 years ago." Kate's voice was steady, but he could hear the tremor beneath. "Andrew believes his father died before he was born. He believes he was loved by a good man who would have been proud of him. That lie has been kinder than any truth involving you." "Then let me make it truth," Christopher said desperately. "Let me be the father he deserves. Let me—" "If you abandon him again," Kate interrupted, turning back to face him with eyes blazing. "If you enter his life and then decide once more that your reputation or your business or your comfort matter more than he does, I will never forgive you. Do you understand? Whatever small possibility exists that we might someday build something from these ashes will be burned away entirely. He is 6 years old. His heart is not a toy for you to play with when the mood strikes." "I will not abandon him." Christopher held her gaze. "I swear it on everything I hold sacred. Give me a chance, Kate. Please, let me prove I have changed." Kate was silent for a long moment, watching Andrew chase a particularly bold duck along the embankment. Finally, she spoke. "You may visit, here, in public places, where he can run if he wishes. I will tell him the truth, or as much of it as he can bear. But I make no promises beyond that. If he rejects you, you will accept it. If he wants nothing to do with you, you will respect that. Do you agree?" "Yes," Christopher said immediately. "Whatever terms you require." "Then come tomorrow at the same time," Kate said, "and prepare yourself, my lord. The truth is an ugly thing, and Andrew is not foolish. He will have questions you may find uncomfortable to answer." She walked away then, calling to Andrew that it was time to return home. The boy ran to her side, slipping his hand into hers with easy trust. Christopher watched them disappear into the evening crowds, 2 small figures walking away from the golden light of the Thames toward the shadowed streets of St. Giles. He had told Kate he had regretted his actions every day since banishing her. this was not entirely accurate. For much of the past 6 years, Christopher had successfully avoided thinking about Kate and the consequences of their encounter. He had thrown himself into business, into the railway investment that had indeed prospered beyond his expectations. He had attended Parliament, managed his estates, fulfilled his social obligations with mechanical efficiency. He had built a life that looked successful from the outside while feeling hollow as an empty shell. The railway consortium had made him wealthy. The partnership with Lord Denison had opened doors to further investments, further opportunities. Kendrick House had been renovated, the estate debts paid, the tenants prospering under improved management. But sometimes, in the moments between waking and full consciousness, he would remember Kate's face in that study, the way hope had died in her eyes, the careful dignity with which she had picked up the leather purse containing £3 and walked out of his life. He had told himself she would be fine. She was a woman of resource. She would find work, probably marry some tradesman, live a simple but adequate life. The child would be raised by another man who would never know the truth. Christopher would be spared the scandal that would have destroyed everything he was working to build. It had seemed almost reasonable at the time. A difficult decision, certainly, but the right one given the circumstances. The responsible choice. Meeting Andrew's silver eyes across a street in St. Giles had annihilated that comfortable narrative. There was no way to pretend anymore, no way to avoid the truth that his son had grown up in poverty while Christopher dined on pheasant and French wine. That night, Christopher could not sleep. He stood at his study window, looking out at the lamplit elegance of Mayfair, and thought about a small room above a laundry where Kate and Andrew probably shared a single narrow bed. He thought about the pride in Andrew's voice when he spoke of his mother's skills, the way the boy had looked at a simple crown as though it were treasure beyond measure. He thought about 6 years of choices, each one building upon the last, creating the vast distance between the world he inhabited and the world where his son fought bullies and stole bread and believed his father was a good man who had died too soon. The following evening, Christopher returned to the Thames embankment with a toy horse he had spent the afternoon carving. His hands, accustomed to holding pens and signing documents, had been clumsy with the knife at first. The finished product was crude, lopsided, clearly the work of someone unused to such tasks. It was also made with more care than anything Christopher could remember creating in his adult life. Kate arrived with Andrew at the appointed hour. The boy looked wary but curious, holding his mother's hand tightly. Kate's face was carefully neutral, revealing nothing of whatever conversations they had shared in the hours between. "Andrew," Kate said quietly, "this gentleman wishes to speak with you. I shall be near if you need me." She stepped away a few paces, close enough to intervene if necessary, but far enough to give them space. Andrew stood his ground, small chin raised, silver eyes assessing Christopher with uncomfortable intensity. "My ma'am told me the truth," Andrew said without preamble. "You are my papa. You did not die. You sent us away." Christopher felt his heart constrict. "Yes." "Why?" The single word contained universes of hurt and confusion. "I was afraid," Christopher said, determined to be honest. "Your mother told me she was expecting you, and I was afraid that people would judge me, that I would lose opportunities I wanted very much. So I gave her a small amount of money and told her to leave." "That was unkind," Andrew said. "Yes, it was." "Did you know we were here, in London? Did you know we were hungry sometimes?" "No." Christopher knelt so that he was at Andrew's eye level. "I did not know. I should have known. I should have found out. I should have cared enough to discover what became of you. But I did not, and that was wrong. And I am sorrier than you can possibly understand." Andrew considered this, his young face solemn. "Ma'am says you want to know me now." "Very much." "Why should I believe you will not send us away again when we become inconvenient?" The question, delivered in a child's voice, was devastating in its perception. "You should not believe it," Christopher said honestly. I broke your mother's trust, and I broke whatever trust you might have had in the idea of a father. Words are easy, Andrew. Any man can make promises. I can only prove my sincerity through actions over time, through being present day after day, through choosing you and your mother over my own comfort whenever such choice is required. I cannot make you believe me. I can only hope you might give me the chance to try. Andrew looked back at Kate, who nodded slightly. Then he looked at Christopher again, this serious small boy with his father's eyes and his mother's strength. I suppose you may try, he said finally, but I shall be watching to see if you mean it. That is fair. Christopher reached into his pocket, withdrawing the carved horse. I made this for you. It is not very well done, I fear, but it is the first thing I have made with my hands in many years. I thought you might like it. Andrew took the toy, turning it over in his hands. His expression softened slightly. You made this yourself? Yes. For me? For you. Andrew clutched the horse to his chest. Thank you, he said quietly. Then, with devastating precision, my ma'am is the strongest person I know. She works very hard. If you hurt her again, I shall be very angry with you. I understand, Christopher said, and I promise you, Andrew, I will do everything in my power to be worthy of you both. The weeks that followed established a tentative pattern. Christopher came to the Thames embankment every evening. Sometimes they fed the ducks. Sometimes they walked through the slightly less dangerous parts of St. Giles. Sometimes they simply sat on the embankment wall while Andrew asked questions and Christopher attempted to answer them honestly. Kate remained present for these meetings, watchful and wary as a mother fox protecting her kit. She spoke to Christopher only when necessary, maintaining a careful distance that made clear she had not forgiven anything. But she did not prevent the meetings, and slowly, incrementally, Andrew's wariness began to ease. Christopher learned about his son. Andrew loved books, but had limited access to them. He was fascinated by horses, but had never ridden one. He could calculate sums with impressive speed, a skill born of necessity in helping Kate manage their limited finances. He asked endless questions about everything, his curiosity as boundless as the sky. He also had nightmares. Kate mentioned this one evening while Andrew was absorbed in trying to skip stones across the Thames. He dreams about being lost, she said quietly, about being alone with no one to help him. It started after I told him the truth about you. Christopher felt the words like accusation, which they undoubtedly were. I am sorry. I did not mean to cause him distress. You did not mean many things, Kate replied. That does not alter the consequences. He could not argue with this. Instead, he asked, What can I do to help? Kate looked at him for a long moment. He needs security, Christopher, not promises or pretty words. Actual security. The knowledge that if something happens to me, he will not be thrown onto the streets, that he has a place in this world, however small, that cannot be taken from him. Let me provide a house, Christopher said immediately. Nothing ostentatious, but something clean and safe. Space for Andrew to have his own room, a garden perhaps. No. Kate's voice was firm. I will not be kept, Christopher. I am not your mistress to be installed in some convenient property where you might visit when the mood strikes. If you wish to help, provide opportunities for me to earn better wages. References for better positions. But I will not be dependent on your whims again. In her private fears, she knew accepting ownership would grant him the power of withdrawal, which she could never risk again. It would not be like that, Christopher protested. I simply want you both to be comfortable. Then respect my terms, Kate said. I survived the worst you could do to me. I rebuilt a life from nothing. I will not surrender the independence I fought so hard to gain, not even for comfort. Christopher wanted to argue, to explain that he was trying to help, that rejecting his assistance was foolish pride. But looking at Kate's face, at the iron determination in her spine, He understood that this was not about pride. It was about survival. She had learned that depending on him was dangerous. She would not make that mistake again. "Very well," he said finally. "I shall inquire about positions that might suit your skills. But Kate, if you need anything at all, you must tell me. Please." She did not promise, but she did not refuse either, and Christopher counted that as progress. Summer deepened into autumn. The visits continued. Slowly, carefully, Christopher and Andrew began to build something that might eventually resemble a relationship. The boy remained cautious, but his questions became less guarded, his smiles more frequent. On a warm September evening, Christopher brought a book of illustrated fables. Andrew's face lit with such joy that Christopher felt his heart twist. They sat on the embankment wall, Christopher reading aloud while Andrew leaned against his shoulder. And for the first time since finding his son, Christopher felt something like peace. Kate watched from a distance, her expression unreadable. But when they finished, and Andrew ran to show her a particularly fine illustration, Christopher saw her hand rest briefly on their son's head with infinite tenderness. And he thought perhaps, eventually, she might find it possible to forgive. He was beginning to believe that they might actually build something real, something lasting, from the wreckage of his past choices. Andrew was warming to him. Kate's hostility had cooled to something more like wary tolerance. It was not love, not trust, but it was a foundation they might build upon. Yet, the slightest change in the wind gave him pause. Then, Lord Dennison summoned him to his Grosvenor Square study, and Christopher's carefully constructed hopes crumbled to ash. "I shall be direct, Kendrick," Dennison said, dispensing with pleasantries. "I have been approached by certain parties offering information about your personal affairs. Information of a most disturbing nature." Christopher's blood turned to ice. "What sort of information?" "Regarding an illegitimate child residing in St. Giles, a child you apparently abandoned 6 years ago and have recently begun visiting." Dennison's face was hard as granite. "Tell me this is not true." There was no point in lying. "It is true." "Then you understand we have a problem." Dennison moved to his desk, withdrew a folder. "The Manchester Railway Consortium represents the most lucrative investment opportunity to arise in a decade. They have made clear that all partners must be of impeccable character. Scandal will not be tolerated. "Andrew is my son," Christopher said. "I will not deny him." "I am not asking you to deny him." Dennison opened the folder. "But I am requiring you to manage the situation with appropriate discretion. The boy and his mother must be removed from London. I have taken the liberty of identifying several options. A cottage in Cornwall, far from society's attention. Or if you prefer, I can arrange passage to America. Either way, generous financial provision will be made. They will live comfortably. You will continue your profitable association with the consortium, and this unfortunate matter will be quietly resolved." Christopher stared at the documents Dennison was pushing across the desk. They outlined precise arrangements, sums of money, properties, transportation schedules, everything necessary to make his son disappear again. "This is generous," Dennison continued. "More than generous considering the circumstances. Most men would simply cut all ties. I am allowing you to provide for the boy while maintaining your position. All you need do is sign these papers and allow me to handle the arrangements." Christopher looked at the documents. He thought about the Manchester Railway Consortium, about the fortune it represented. He thought about his position in society, carefully cultivated over 6 years. He thought about everything he would lose if scandal broke. Then he thought about Andrew's face when Christopher had given him the carved horse, about the boy's careful question, "Why should I believe you will not send us away again when we become inconvenient?" About Kate's words, "If you abandon him again, I will never forgive you." "No," Christopher said. Dennison's eyebrows rose. "I beg your pardon?" "I said no." Christopher pushed the papers back across the desk. I will not send them away. I will not hide them in Cornwall or ship them to America. They are my family, however unconventional, and I will not abandon them again. Then you are withdrawing from the consortium? If that is the price of keeping my family, yes. Denison's expression hardened. You are making a terrible mistake, Kendrick. This scandal will destroy you. Society does not forgive such transgressions. Perhaps, Christopher said, but I shall be able to look at my reflection without feeling disgust, which seems more valuable than any railway investment. Christopher exited Denison's study, his hands shaking, a sharp weight of dread pressing upon his spirit. He had just destroyed years of careful planning, had thrown away fortune and position for a boy who barely trusted him and a woman who hated him. It was possibly the most foolish decision he had ever made. It was also the only decision his conscience would allow. He went directly to Copper Lane, climbing the narrow stairs to the lodgings Kate and Andrew shared. He had never been inside before, respecting Kate's insistence on maintaining boundaries. Now, as she opened the door to his knock, her face registering surprise and concern, he said simply, I need to speak with you both. Kate stepped aside, allowing him into a room smaller than his dressing closet. Andrew looked up from a book borrowed from the charity school, his silver eyes questioning. Christopher knelt so that he was at Andrew's level. I have something to tell you, he began, then stopped, unsure how to explain. You are leaving, Andrew said flatly. You came to say goodbye. No, Christopher said quickly. No, Andrew, I am not leaving. But I need you to understand something. Lord Denison, a man I do business with, has discovered that you exist. He wants me to send you and your mother away to Cornwall or America. He says it is the only way to avoid scandal. Andrew's face went very still. Kate drew in a sharp breath. I told him no, Christopher continued. I told him that you are my family, and I will not abandon you again. Which means I shall likely face significant social consequences. I may lose business partnerships and invitations and the respect of people whose opinions I once valued. But none of that matters compared to you. Do you understand what I am trying to say? You chose us, Andrew said slowly, over the scandal avoidance. I chose you, Christopher confirmed, over everything else, and I will continue choosing you every day for as long as you will allow me to be part of your lives. Kate made a small sound, quickly suppressed. When Christopher looked at her, he saw tears streaming down her face. You should think carefully about this, she said. Once scandal breaks, there is no undoing it. Your position, your reputation, everything you worked to build will be destroyed. I did not build anything worth keeping, Christopher replied. I built a life that required me to deny my own child. That is not success. That is cowardice dressed in fine tailoring. Andrew launched himself at Christopher, small arms wrapping around his neck with unexpected force. You really mean it, he said, voice muffled against Christopher's shoulder. You are not going to send us away. Never, Christopher promised, holding his son close for the first time. Not for all the railway investments in the world. Over Andrew's head, his eyes met Kate's. She was still crying, but she was also smiling, the first genuine smile she had directed at him in 6 years. It was tentative, fragile as spring ice, but it was real. Thank you, she mouthed silently. Christopher nodded, then buried his face in his son's hair and allowed himself to finally, truly understand what he had almost lost forever. The scandal broke within a week. Lord Denison, furious at Christopher's refusal, made certain that every drawing room in London knew about the Earl of Kendrick's illegitimate son residing in the rookeries of St. Giles. The gossip spread with the speed and ruthlessness that only society scandal could achieve. Christopher attended the Countess of Fairmont's autumn ball, knowing it would likely be his last major social event. The invitations would stop arriving soon enough, but he had one final thing he needed to do before society closed its doors to him permanently. The ballroom was magnificent, all crystal chandeliers and gilt plasterwork and elaborate floral arrangements. The cream of London society circulated beneath the glittering lights, their conversations a constant murmur of speculation and judgment. Christopher felt every eye upon him as he entered, felt the whispers that followed his progress across the polished floor. Lord Denison stood near the refreshment tables, surrounded by several influential gentlemen, including the Duke of Westbrook and Baron Carstairs. As Christopher approached, Denison's expression turned coldly triumphant. "Kendrick," Denison said, his voice carrying clearly across the immediate vicinity. "How unexpected to see you this evening. I was under the impression you had pressing personal matters requiring your attention." Christopher understood the game being played. Denison intended to publicly humiliate him, to make an example that would warn other men against allowing personal sentiment to interfere with business. Very well. If this was to be a public reckoning, Christopher would provide one. "Indeed, I do have pressing personal matters," Christopher said, his voice pitched to carry across the ballroom. Conversations began to fade as people turned to watch, which is why I appreciate this opportunity to address them before so many witnesses. Absolute silence descended upon the ballroom. 200 members of London's finest society turned to stare. Denison's triumphant expression faltered slightly, uncertainty creeping in. Christopher climbed the 3 steps to the musician's dais, positioning himself where everyone could see and hear. His hands were shaking, but his voice remained steady as he began to speak. "6 years ago," he said, "I committed an act of profound cowardice. A young woman who trusted me, who worked in my household and relied upon my protection, informed me that she carried my child. I was afraid of scandal, afraid of losing business opportunities, afraid of what people might think. So I gave her £3 and told her to take her shame and leave my house." Gasps echoed across the ballroom. Several ladies clutched their fans. Christopher saw the Countess of Fairmont's face go pale with shock. "Her name is Miss Catherine Morrison," Christopher continued. "She survived. She and my son lived in poverty in St. Giles while I dined on pheasant and conducted business that made me wealthy. She worked until her hands bled to provide for the child I denied. She gave birth alone, in circumstances I cannot bear to imagine, because I valued my reputation more than her welfare or the welfare of my son." "This is most inappropriate," Denison sputtered. "Kendrick, I must insist." "My son's name is Andrew," Christopher interrupted, his voice rising. "He is 6 years old. He is brave and kind and curious. He has the Beaumont silver eyes. He believes in justice and protecting those weaker than himself. He is everything I should have been and was not. And he is my heir. He will inherit my title, my estate, everything I possess." "You cannot be serious," the Duke of Westbrook said. "The boy is illegitimate. Society will never accept." "I care not a whit what society accepts," Christopher said flatly. "For 6 years I cared desperately what all of you thought. I shaped my life around your approval. I made decisions based on maintaining my position among you. And the cost of that concern was abandoning my own child to poverty and my child's mother to circumstances that should shame every person in this room." He turned to look at Denison directly. "Lord Denison has offered me a choice. Send my family away where they will not embarrass me, maintain my position in the Manchester Railway Consortium, and continue profiting from associations with gentlemen who consider reputation more important than basic decency, or acknowledge my family publicly, accept whatever social consequences follow, and sleep at night knowing I chose honor over profit." "The choice is obvious to any sensible man," Denison said. "Yes," Christopher agreed. "It is, which is why I withdraw from all partnerships with you, Lord Denison. I choose my son. I choose his mother. I choose the family I abandoned to live with integrity rather than continuing to prosper through cowardice." The silence that followed was absolute. Christopher could hear his own heartbeat, could feel the pressure of the moment upon him. He had just destroyed himself socially, financially, irrevocably. He had also told the truth for the first time in 6 years. The relief was staggering. "Well," the Countess of Fairmont said into the silence, her voice carrying clearly, "I suppose we know who shall not be receiving Christmas invitations this year." Several people laughed, the sound breaking the tension. Conversations resumed, though now Christopher was the clear subject of every discussion. He descended from the dais and walked toward the exit, expecting no one to acknowledge him. He was surprised when Baron Carstairs stepped into his path. "That took courage, Kendrick," the older man said quietly. "Foolish courage, perhaps, but courage nonetheless. My respect for what you have done, even if I cannot sanction the circumstances that required it." Christopher nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He continued toward the exit, each step taking him away from the life he had known and toward an uncertain future. He did not see Kate until he was halfway down the front steps of the Fairmont mansion. She stood in the shadows of the service entrance, dressed in a simple dark gown, her hair pulled back severely. She was working the ball, he realized, doing whatever sewing work was required for a major social event. She had witnessed everything. "You did not need to do that," she said as he approached. "Yes, I did." Christopher stopped a few paces away, maintaining respectful distance. "I owed you truth. I owed Andrew truth. I owed myself truth, even if I came to it 6 years too late." "They will destroy you," Kate said. "Society does not forgive such public defiance." "Let them." Christopher felt strange lightness, as though a weight he had carried for years had suddenly lifted. "I have spent 6 years building a life that required me to deny the people who matter most. That was not a life worth living." Kate studied his face in the lamplight. "What will you do now?" "I am entirely uncertain," Christopher admitted, "though I suspect I shall have considerably more free time, given the number of former business associates who will refuse to work with me. Perhaps I could learn a trade. I have discovered I am not entirely hopeless at woodcarving." A smile ghosted across Kate's face. "Andrew treasures that horse. He sleeps with it under his pillow." "Does he?" Christopher felt warmth bloom in his chest. "I could make him other things, a whole stable perhaps, or whatever he might like." "You should ask him yourself," Kate said. "He would like that, would—" They stood in silence for a moment, the sounds of the ball continuing behind them. Two people who had hurt each other and been hurt by each other, trying to find their way towards something like understanding. "I loved you," Kate said finally. 6 years ago. I loved you desperately, foolishly. When you sent me away, it felt like dying. I know." Christopher's voice was rough. "And I cannot undo it. I cannot give you back those years or take away the suffering I caused. All I can do is promise that I will spend however long you will allow me trying to be better than I was." "I do not love you anymore," Kate continued. "I am not certain I even like you particularly. You destroyed something in me that day in your study, something that may never be entirely whole again." "I understand." "But," Kate said slowly, "I believe you are trying to change. And I believe Andrew needs a father, even one as flawed as you. So I am willing to see what we might build from these ashes. Not romance, not love, but perhaps partnership, perhaps friendship, perhaps someday something more, though I make no promises." "I ask for nothing more than the chance to try," Christopher said. "Whatever you are willing to give, at whatever pace you require. I will wait, Kate. I will wait as long as is necessary." Kate looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Come to Copper Lane tomorrow evening. Bring materials for wood carving. You can teach Andrew while I work. We shall see how it goes from there." "Thank you," Christopher said, "for this chance, for your generosity, for not giving up on the possibility that people can change." "Do not thank me yet," Kate replied. "I am not easy to live with these days. I have opinions about everything, and I shall not be silent when I disagree with you. I will call you out when you are wrong, and I will not pretend you are anything more than what you demonstrate yourself to be through consistent action over time." "That sounds," Christopher said, "absolutely perfect." Kate laughed then, short and surprised, and Christopher thought it might be the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. She started to turn away, then paused. "One more thing, Christopher. That speech in the ballroom? That was for Andrew and for me. But it was also for you. You finally chose to be the man you should have been 6 years ago. That matters." She walked away then, disappearing into the service entrance, leaving Christopher standing alone on the steps with his heart full of something that felt remarkably like hope. The weeks that followed were an education in humility. Christopher's memberships at White's and Brooks's were quietly revoked. Business associates stopped returning his correspondence. Invitations ceased arriving. The servants at Kendrick House began giving notice, uncomfortable working for a master whose reputation had become scandalous. Christopher discovered he did not particularly care. He moved Kate and Andrew to a modest house in Bloomsbury, purchased in Kate's name with money from the sale of several investments. She had resisted initially, but he had pointed out that Andrew needed space to grow, that they needed safety and security that Copper Lane could never provide. "It is in your name," he emphasized, "not mine. If I prove unworthy of your trust again, if I fail you in any way, you have a secure home that no one can take from you. This is not dependence. This is ensuring you have a foundation upon which to build your own independence." Kate had accepted, though Christopher suspected it cost her pride to do so. The house was nothing compared to Kendrick House or the townhouses of Mayfair, but it had 3 bedrooms, a small garden, and windows that let in light without admitting the smell of rotting refuse. Andrew had his own room for the first time in his life. Kate had space to work without hunching over a candle in a room barely large enough to turn around in. Christopher visited every evening. He brought wood and taught Andrew to carve. He listened to Kate's stories about her work for the modiste, which was expanding as her reputation for fine stitching spread. He helped Andrew with reading and mathematics. He learned to prepare simple meals when Kate worked late. He was terrible at domestic tasks, having never needed to perform them before. His cooking was nearly inedible. His attempts at household repairs generally made things worse. But he persisted, and slowly, incrementally, he became less useless. Andrew gradually dropped his guard. He began to call Christopher Papa without prompting. He would climb into Christopher's lap while they read together. He asked Christopher to attend his reading examinations at the charity school and looked for his father's face in the crowd with undisguised joy when he found it. Kate remained more cautious. She was polite, occasionally warm, but maintained clear boundaries. She did not speak of the past, except when necessary. She did not discuss the future beyond practical arrangements. She treated Christopher with the careful neutrality one might extend to a business associate who had proven themselves unreliable once and might do so again. Christopher understood this. Trust had to be earned through consistency, through showing up day after day, through choosing them over his own comfort in 1,000 small moments. He could not demand forgiveness or acceleration of the process. He could only be present and hope that eventually Kate might find it possible to see him as something other than the man who had destroyed her life. One evening, in late autumn, nearly 6 months after Christopher's public confession at the Fairmont ball, Kate asked him to stay after Andrew had gone to bed. "I need to discuss something with you," she said, settling into the chair across from him in the small parlor. The firelight danced over the worn furniture, casting shadows across her face. "Of course." Christopher set aside the piece of wood he had been working into what would eventually be a small bird. "What is it?" "Andrew asked me today why you do not live with us," Kate said. "He wanted to know why his papa leaves every night instead of staying in the house with the extra bedroom." Christopher's heart clenched. "What did you tell him?" "I told him the truth, that you and I are not married, that we are trying to build trust after years of being apart, that sometimes adults need time to determine what kind of relationship they can have with each other. That was well said. He asked if you might ever live with us. Kate looked into the fire rather than at Christopher. He said he would like that, to have you here when he wakes up in the morning. I would like that as well, Christopher said carefully. But I will not press you, Kate. This is your home, your sanctuary. I will not intrude upon it unless you truly wish me to. I have been thinking, Kate said slowly, about what partnership might mean. Not romance, necessarily. Not the kind of marriage where people pretend at feelings they do not possess, but practical partnership, raising Andrew together, sharing a home, building something stable. What are you saying? Kate turned to look at him directly. I am saying that I believe you have changed, that these months have shown me you are capable of putting Andrew's needs above your own comfort, that you are trying, genuinely trying, to be a better man than the one who sent me away 6 years ago. But? Christopher heard the word hanging unspoken. But I do not love you, Kate said bluntly. I respect what you have become. I appreciate your efforts. I believe you care for Andrew. But the woman who loved Christopher Edward Beaumont died in that room above the Halifax laundry. She cannot be brought back. I know. Christopher's voice was rough. I killed her when I chose 3 pounds over her well-being. So if we are to do this, if we are to build a life together, it must be on new terms. Not romance, not the fantasy I once harbored, but honest partnership between 2 people who share a child and a desire to provide him with stability. I would accept those terms, Christopher said, if they are truly what you want. What I want, Kate said quietly, is for Andrew to grow up knowing both his parents chose to be present in his life. What I want is security, not the insecurity of waiting to see if you will abandon us again. What I want is a home where my son feels safe and loved. She paused. Can you provide that without demanding more than I can give? Yes. Christopher held her gaze. I can be your partner without requiring you to love me. I can raise our son together with you without expecting forgiveness I have not fully earned. And Kate, I swear to you, I will never stop working to become worthy of whatever trust you are willing to extend. Kate nodded slowly. Then we shall try. You may move into the spare room. We shall present ourselves as a family, unusual perhaps in its origins, but united in our commitment to Andrew. And perhaps someday, if I find it possible to open my heart again, there might be more. But I cannot promise that. I ask for no promises, Christopher said, only the chance to be present, to show you through actions, not words, that people can change. Very well. Kate stood, extending her hand as one might to seal a business arrangement. Then we are agreed, partners in raising our son, honest with each other, building something new from what we both broke. Christopher took her hand, held it gently. Thank you, Kate, for this chance, for your forgiveness, even if it is incomplete, for believing that redemption is possible. Do not thank me yet, Kate replied, but there was the hint of a smile at the corners of her mouth. Living with me may prove more challenging than you anticipate. I have strong opinions about everything from breakfast to bedtime, and I shall not be silent when I disagree with you. That sounds, Christopher said, echoing his words from months ago, absolutely perfect. Autumn progressed toward winter. Christopher conveyed his belongings from Kendrick House into the modest Bloomsbury home. It felt like exile from society, which it was, and like coming home, which he had not expected. He woke each morning to the sound of Andrew's laughter from the room next door. He shared breakfast with his son and the woman he had wronged, discussing plans for the day with the casual intimacy of people who shared space and purpose. He devoted his days to managing what remained of his investments, consulting on projects that did not require impeccable social standing, and slowly rebuilding a life around priorities he should have established years earlier. His evenings were devoted to family. He helped Andrew with schoolwork, carved toys in front of the fire while Kate sewed, listened to her read aloud from books borrowed from the circulating library. They developed routines, small rituals that transformed a house into something approaching a home. It was not the life Christopher had imagined for himself. It was smaller, quieter, less impressive by society's standards. But it was also more real, more genuine, more satisfying than anything he had experienced during his years of careful social climbing. He watched Kate slowly, imperceptibly, begin to relax. The careful walls she had maintained started to lower by degrees too subtle to mark precisely. She laughed more easily. She touched his arm when making a point. She sought his opinion on household matters and actually seemed to value his input, even when disagreeing. They did not share a bed. They did not speak words of love. But they built something together, piece by patient piece, moment by careful moment. One evening in December, as the first snow fell across London, Christopher looked up from the wooden bird he was finishing to find Kate watching him. "What is it?" he asked. "I was thinking," she said slowly, "about how much has changed in less than a year. How different everything looks from where we were." "Are you happy?" Christopher asked, the question escaping before he could censor it. "Or at least, are you less unhappy than you were?" Kate considered this carefully. "I am building something new," she said finally. "I am learning what it means to share my life with someone who once broke my heart so thoroughly I thought I might never recover. I am discovering that love is not always necessary for partnership, but respect and honesty are essential." "That does not answer my question." "No," Kate agreed. "It does not, because I am not entirely certain of the answer yet. Ask me again in a year, Christopher. Ask me when we have weathered more storms together, when I have seen you choose us over comfort in circumstances more challenging than evening domesticity." "I will ask you," Christopher promised. "Every year, if necessary, until you find your answer." Kate smiled then, small and tentative, but real. "You may be waiting quite some time." "I have already wasted 6 years," Christopher replied. "I may now afford a measure of patience." Spring arrived in 1821 with unexpected warmth. The small garden behind the Bloomsbury house exploded with color. Andrew, now 7, spent hours building elaborate forts from sticks and imagination, while Christopher and Kate sat on the small terrace and watched their son play. They had been living together as a family for 6 months. It was not always easy. They argued about money, about Andrew's education, about how to handle the inevitable questions from neighbors about their unusual family structure. But they worked through disagreements with increasing skill, finding compromises that neither might have chosen alone, but both could live with. One such argument centered on Christopher's insistence on purchasing Andrew a costly waistcoat, which Kate viewed as ostentatious folly given their new, modest circumstances. Christopher had given up trying to regain his position in society. He had accepted that certain doors would remain forever closed to him, that the Earl of Kendrick would be remembered primarily for his public confession of scandalous behavior. He found he did not particularly care. The life he had now, small and modest as it was, felt more valuable than anything he had possessed before. On an April afternoon, as golden light painted the garden and Andrew's laughter rang clear as bells, Christopher and Kate sat side by side, watching their son defend an imaginary fort against dragons only he could see. "Papa!" Andrew called. "Come help! The dragons are attacking the south wall." "I am coming." Christopher rose, but Kate's hand on his arm stopped him. "Wait," she said quietly. "I want to tell you something first." Christopher sat back down, heart suddenly pounding. Kate's expression was serious, though not angry or sad. Something else. Something he could not quite identify. "These 6 months," Kate began, "have been harder than I anticipated in some ways. Learning to trust you again, to believe that you will not suddenly decide we are inconvenient once more. Learning to share space and decisions and the daily work of raising a child. I know, Christopher said, and I am grateful. Let me finish, Kate interrupted gently. They have been harder than I anticipated, but they have also been better. You have shown me through consistent action that you have changed, that you choose us over and over in small ways and large ones, that you are present not because you must be, but because you wish to be. I do wish to be, Christopher said. More than anything. I know. Kate looked out at Andrew, still absorbed in his imaginary battle, which is why I need to tell you that I am beginning to feel something I thought had died years ago. Not love, not yet, perhaps never quite what it was before, but something new. Something that might eventually become love, given time and patience and continued effort. Christopher felt his breath catch. Kate! Do not make this into more than it is, she warned. I am not ready to say I love you. I am not certain I will ever be ready. But I am willing to admit that possibility exists, that my heart, which I was certain was dead, might be capable of healing enough to open again. That is more than I dared hope for, Christopher said quietly. You asked me months ago if I could ever love you again, Kate continued. I told you to ask me in a year, but I think perhaps I can give you a different answer now. Not yes, but not no either. Instead, perhaps. Perhaps, Christopher repeated, tasting the word like wine. Perhaps is enough. Good, Kate said, because it is all I can offer right now. Andrew's voice rang out again, more urgent this time. Papa, ma'am, I need help. The dragons are winning. Kate laughed, the sound bright and genuine. You had better go save our son from imaginary dragons. Christopher rose, but paused to look down at her. Thank you, he said, for perhaps, for possibility, for believing that redemption is not a moment, but a life lived differently. Go, Kate said, but she was smiling. Before Andrew decides we are useless against dragons. Christopher ran to join his son in the garden, dropping to his knees in the grass to help defend the fort. Andrew wrapped small arms around his neck, laughing with delight. I knew you would come, Papa. You always come when I need you. The words struck Christopher with unexpected force. You always come when I need you. 6 months of showing up, of being present, of choosing family over comfort, distilled into simple trust. This, Christopher thought, was redemption. Not the dramatic public confession at the Fairmont Ball, though that had been necessary. Not the rejection of business opportunities or social position, though those had mattered. No, redemption was this. Kneeling in grass with his son, defending imaginary forts against imaginary dragons, while Kate watched from the terrace with perhaps, maybe, the beginning of forgiveness in her eyes. It was not perfect. It was not easy. But it was real, and it was theirs, built piece by patient piece from the ashes of what Christopher had destroyed 6 years earlier. The dragons are retreating, Andrew announced triumphantly. We won, Papa. We saved the fort. We did indeed, Christopher agreed, ruffling his son's dark hair. Well done, Andrew. Your defensive strategy was excellent. Will you teach me about real battles? Andrew asked, his curiosity as boundless as ever. About the wars and how generals decided where to put their armies? I shall teach you anything you wish to learn, Christopher promised, though perhaps we should focus on mathematics and history rather than military strategy just yet. But Papa... But nothing, Kate called from the terrace. It is time for supper. Come inside, both of you, before the food grows cold. They walked inside together, Andrew between them, chattering about dragons and forts and the book he was reading about knights. Christopher caught Kate's eye over their son's head. She smiled, small and tentative but genuine. Perhaps, Christopher thought. Perhaps was a fragile thing, as delicate as spring flowers, as tentative as new trust. But perhaps was also hope. Perhaps was possibility. Perhaps was the beginning of something that might, eventually, become love. He could live with, perhaps. He could build a life on, perhaps. He could be patient with, perhaps, for as long as Kate required. They had time now. All the time in the world to discover what they might become together. These three imperfect people building a family from broken pieces and stubborn hope. The afternoon light painted everything gold as they stepped inside. Andrew still talking, Kate listening with patient affection, Christopher simply present in this moment that he had almost thrown away forever. This was not the ending he had imagined 6 years ago when he gave Kate £3 and told her to disappear. It was not the life he had planned, the future he had worked toward, the destiny he had desired. It was better. It was real. It was enough. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end. If this story of love earned through redemption and patience touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who believes in second chances. Your support helps us continue creating stories of courage, transformation, and the power of choosing love over comfort.